Hi, my name is Kremena Dimitrova. I'm a London-based illustrator and lecturer. I'm also a PhD researcher in visualizing history through comics. I specialize in children's book illustration and comics, and I create a lot of work for the heritage sector through illustration residencies and various creative interventions. One such project is my commission with the West Cheshire Museums. I'm collaborating with Chester Young Producers to deliver Chester's Festival of Hope, for which, using a comic strip format, I'm visualizing people's experiences in the Cheshire area during the COVID-19 lockdown, based on interviews collected by the Chester Young Producers. So, today I will talk to you about how to start your comic strip. This workshop offers a step-by-step guide to creating a comic strip, from idea generation, narration, and storyboarding to speech bubbles, panels, and gutters. Whether you're a comics reader or maker, this workshop provides you with a better understanding of comics as a medium. So, let's begin. Starting your comic strip. The first question we need to ask ourselves is, what exactly is a comic? A comic, or a sequential narrative, or a graphic narrative, or a graphic novel, or whatever you'd like to call them, names which are all correct by the way, are made of the following three main things. Images plus words plus time equals comics. Comics combine images and words in unique, innovative, and playful ways to visually express and communicate narratives or ideas, making them particularly effective at telling stories and histories. Something to remember is that while comics without text can and do exist, comics without images don't. Now, the way words and images are combined in comics is what separates the medium from any other visual media. Words and images are combined through various other devices and story building blocks, such as speech balloons, captions, panels, gutters to tell a story and indicate a dialogue, narration, sound effects, or any other information. But remember, you do not need to use all comics devices always together. It all depends on the story you want to tell. I will explain a bit about these devices in what follows next, starting with panels. A panel, also known as a box or a frame in comics, is where the main action takes place. It is where the story is revealed, so panels represent time in comics. Each panel, each moment, each image that you see is a moment in time. And when you string them all together, what you get is a complete story. A panel is an individual frame or a single drawing in the multiple panel sequence of comic strip or a comic book. A panel consists of a single drawing depicting a frozen moment in time. When multiple panels are present, they often, though not always, are separated by a short amount of usually white, empty spaces called gutters. It is often thought that the gutter's job is nothing more than to arrange the panels in rows, and that their existence is merely for breaking up the sequence of panels, showing that each panel is a separate moment in the story. However, the gutters are much more than that. In fact, gutters serve as invisible messengers. They give the reader time to think, take a breath, contemplate, and decide what action has taken place between one panel to the next. For example, in these images, you can see how image 1 shows a woman with a teapot, then she is at a door. Then immediately in image 3, we can see her inside the room looking distressed on the floor near a man. In image 4, we can see a room with a gun and a bullet box on a table. This indicates that potentially the man must have used the gun. This particular moment has not been depicted, but in a way it happens in the gutter between image 3 and image 4. So the reader is left to guess what must have happened. Now, panels in comics can be drawn in many different sizes and can be arranged in different ways. They can appear separated with gutters next to one another or overlap and interlink as witnessed in this example. Next, we will talk about narration. Narration in comics is achieved through speech balloons, which come in different shapes, and their purpose is to give voice to comics characters. Narration is always also achieved by including text, captions in dialogue boxes. In a caption, words appear in a box, either separated from the rest of the panel or included in the panel, usually to give voice to a narrator, but sometimes captions are also used for the character's thoughts or dialogue. In some comics where speech balloons are not used, the caption provides the reader with text about what is happening in the images. As the comics maker, you will act as the narrator and storyteller, commenting on your own story. Sounds can be shown by creating a word that phonetically imitates, resembles, or suggests the sound that it describes. This can be used to also show for example, the sound of animals or the sound of clock ticking, and so on. Now, when one thinks of comics, probably the first thing that comes to mind is fictional stories rendered as black and white, pen and ink drawings. However, comics are much more than that. Comics are also used for telling real stories and real histories about real people. And yes, many comics are created in black and white, but they can also be created in color using any of the following materials, such as pencils, pens, paints, chalks, charcoal, created as collages, photomontages, paintings, or a combination of all these. For example, the way I create my comics and graphic narratives is through collaging various hand-drawn and painted fragments, which I then manipulate and combine digitally to create digital collages. As I have already mentioned, I specialize in visualizing history, and here are some examples of comics and graphic narratives I have created to visually communicate and bring to light histories for various UK museums and heritage sites. And you can see how they incorporate several hand-drawn, textured, and painterly elements when illustrating real people and events in history. One needs to carefully consider the clothing, that is the fashion of the chosen era, and how people and places actually looked like in the past. So there is a lot of research involved before the creative process can even begin. In both images, you can notice how I have used hand-drawn illustrations and sepia colors to give a nostalgic and vintage look to commemorate 100 years since World War I. You can also see how in both comic strips I have drawn panels within panels to show how a story and event happened within an overarching narrative, or to show a close-up action. I also like being playful with the way I juxtapose words and images, and experiment with the way they appear on the page, which can be witnessed in these comic strips, visualizing a medieval Jewish manuscript. The comic strips interlink and can be arranged horizontally and vertically to tell the story. Similarly, I experiment with composition possibilities, which can be witnessed in these World War II related comic strips, which when put together form an interlinked vertical graphic narrative. So the main thing to remember is that there isn't a right or wrong way of doing things when making comics, and everyone has their own preferred methodology. With regards to methods and processes, I will now explain my own ways of making comics and what stages I usually go through during the creative process, by giving examples that relate to the Chester's Festival of Hope and the comic strip commission I have been working on. As I have mentioned, the project focuses on using a comic strip format to visualize people's experiences in the Cheshire area during the COVID-19 lockdown, based on interviews collected by Chester young producers. So I started by choosing a story or history. In this case, this was an interview. Then I focused on the main points of the interview, which I deemed important, that is, coping with lockdown conditions with the help of Instagram daily routines, which I thought was useful, helpful, and informative for others, something people could also try. I also chose to focus on and highlight the Instagram story, because in terms of creating a comic strip, composition-wise, Instagram works really well. In my view, Instagram already, in a way, looks like a comic strip. It is very visual, and it incorporates words which are already boxed like panels in comics and are divided by white spaces which look like gutters in comics. We'll show you in a moment what I mean. The next step was idea generation, brainstorming, and mind mapping, which helped me decide on what to include in and what to exclude from the comic strip, and how to present the information. This was followed with research, looking at references, for example, how an Instagram page actually looks like on a phone. And finally, the creative making process can begin. This involved a sketching phase, drawing ideas, planning visual possibilities, and storyboarding by creating thumbnail drawings. Thumbnails are small preliminary sketches, usually done within an outlined frame, as a quick snapshot of your illustration idea. They help you plan out your work visually. Thumbnails are very basic sketches without much detail, so you can quickly draw many possibilities and decide which ones are worth pursuing further. Thumbnails are essentially a way of storyboarding. A storyboard is a visual representation of a comic sequence which breaks down the action into individual panels. It is a series of ordered drawings, dialogue, or other pertinent details. A storyboard shows and sketches out how your story will unfold shot by shot. These are followed by roughs. As you can see, roughs are larger than thumbnails in size, but still take relatively little time to create. Roughs are an essential step in the approval process with regards to your final illustrations. Roughs give an opportunity to show or review the content and the general layout of your comics and make edits if necessary. Roughs are not your finals, they are work in progress. In the rough stage, I consider close-ups, different compositions and different perspectives, as well as details such as facial expressions, clothing, color, and so on. Here you can see how I have depicted the different ways the interviewee was feeling during lockdown. Being sad, crying, feeling low, wearing a mask, then happy once into a routine such as having breakfast, engaging in hobbies, exercising through yoga, and reading. Basically, getting on with life. To save myself time and effort, instead of redrawing elements I'm not happy with or I'm unsure about, I instead cut my roughs up and reposition the different pieces to see which order and composition looks best. Now, collage comes in handy here, and in my view, it is a creative way to engage with illustration and art making more generally. I simply cut the illustrations into pieces and rearrange them until I'm happy, though I always allow for things to evolve from the sketch phase to the making phase up until the final comics is complete. The next step was to create the final digital version using Adobe Photoshop, and this is how one of the comic strips for the Chester's Festival of Hope looks like when finished. As you can see, the final version differs from the rough sketch slightly, but the idea is generally there. And again, as I mentioned previously, an Instagram page on a phone looks really similar to comics. It incorporates visuals, that is images. It incorporates text. It tells a story. It also has panels, also like in comics, and it has small white space dividing the panels, dividing each visual, which in comics is the gutter. So, what is your story? Now, why not make your own comic strip? You can start by choosing a story or history. This can be something that recently happened to you, a page or a paragraph from your favorite book, a newspaper article, or something humorous you might have overheard people talking about. Or in line with our Chester's Festival of Hope, why not use the power of comics to visually express your own feelings about the COVID-19 lockdown? All you will need is a pen or pencil, paper and scissors, or any other materials you may have available at home. So, be creative, the possibilities are endless, have fun and enjoy the process. I had a great time talking to you about comics. I hope you did too. Now, why not make your own comic? Thank you. Bye.